Chesshir, Jay's the CEO of the Little Rock Regional Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Glad to be here.
Everyone knows a lot of this. David, let's get started with you. You've been working on this tech park initiative for a few years now. We're going to talk about some big news that happened at the time, but it was a short rundown of the history, the story, and kind of how we got into this perspective.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to I'm gonna go way back.
Now I'm going to go really way back. So go back to 1999, 2000. Many of you probably aren't old enough to do that. I'm sitting in Hot Springs, Arkansas, trying to figure out a way that we can take this new tech thing and make something out of it in Hot Springs. And I came up with this great idea of creating a technology park on the south side of the airport in Hot Springs, because there was a lot of land there that couldn't be used for airside operations because of the topography. Kind of grew a vision out of a company that was actually operating there, that was a division that was created by a tech guy from within that company. It was a national company doing extremely well. Took that vision, sold it to the folks in Hot Springs, and decided that I needed to come over here and visit with Dr. Tim O'Brien, who was then the director of the Bio Ventures for UAMS, and explained to him that we wanted to be the farm club for all the things coming out of Bio Ventures in growing companies, and what a great place it would be to do it in Hot Springs. Made an appointment with Dr. O'Brien, came over here, made my pitch, and he smiled, and his really cool Irish look said, "You're too far away." And I looked at him with really strange eyes and I said, "I can't be too far away. It's, doctor, it's like an hour." And he goes, "No," he said, "minutes matter when it comes to bio. And therefore, good idea, great plan, unfortunately, you're too far away." Fast forward to early 2005, February the 14th to be exact. I show up in Little Rock and a new job at the Little Rock Regional Chamber of Commerce doing regional economic development, and happened in the first week to run into Dr. O'Brien in a reception. And I smiled and said, "Why hasn't this been done in Little Rock?" And he smiled and said, "Well, you're here now, do it." Interestingly, a guy named Lucas Margraves was working for us at the chamber back then. He and I and Dixon Flake, who was a committee member that we had working on some other things, got together and began to look at the process of creating a research and technology park. Early on, it was strictly to take advantage of what was coming out of UAMS with the Bio Ventures facility. As we moved forward, we started doing feasibility activity in 2007, went to then Governor Huckabee and his economic development team and said, "We'd like to create legislation similar to what other states have done, authorizing some of these things, but only authorizing them where research entities actually existed." And so the governor and his team agreed. We put together the model legislation. It was part of his package, and it passed overwhelmingly. From that, we then went to what we saw as the research entities in Little Rock, including UAMS, Children's Hospital, and UALR, along with the city, and said, "We're going to have to do a feasibility study to determine whether or not this is possible." We raised $100,000 to do that feasibility study. That was a much maligned study over the course of what happened to be some of the biggest public relations blunders ever seen in the city of Little Rock, from the way this thing got handled. All very well intentioned, but all by people who've never done this before. And so that feasibility study led to the agreement that, first of all, the city, UAMS, and UALR would be the sponsors of this organization, this public entity that's a state organization. That Children's, while not being a sponsor, would be a financial investor at the same level, and that we ought to go forward and do this because it was the only way we were going to jumpstart our economy. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So we did that. We went through the site location process that was unbelievably bad. And we looked at an area between the three research entities because of that time issue that Dr. O'Brien had talked to me about back in 1999, 2000, and as you all well know, that flopped miserably. We moved forward recognizing that the paradigm had changed really in these investments and activities across the country, and I believe that we were lucky at being so bad in that process. And the reason why I believe we were lucky in being so bad is that if you went to other parts of the country, if you looked at, for example, the Research Triangle and other major mature research and technology parks, they were struggling because folks like Durham, North Carolina, was having a complete reinvention of themselves in the downtown area, and they were becoming the cool place to be for entrepreneurial activity, startups, including bio as well as technology related. And so that huge screw up was probably the best thing that happened to us. And that led us into a separate siting process that focused on a lot of areas, obviously the downtown area being one of those, and it being the chosen area. And I'll let Brent tell you about what happened last night, but that in a very quick fashion, without all the scars and the wars and the tremors, is how we got to where we are today and why we're so pleased to see you guys here, not only from the standpoint of this activity, but the standpoint of the activity that's going on behind this wall, back there in the back and all around downtown Little Rock and Central Arkansas at the moment.
So, Brent, you got some good news for us.
Yes, we certainly did. Got some pretty good coverage too, so most people may have seen it, read the paper, or watched the news last night. The city board did vote unanimously to release about $6.8 million to us to fund phase 1A of the Tech Park project. And what that money is going to allow us to do is to create equity in our purchase of first block of properties on Main Street, a couple blocks up the street, and then we'll go and seek some traditional financing for the rest. But what it allows us to do is to buy those properties and begin the construction and finish out, to actually have a facility to put folks like yourself in beyond this 8,000 square feet we're in now. So a huge monumental step as far as making this something from a concept to actual physical thing we can call home for this tech industry that we're all supporting here in Central Arkansas.
One of the cool things that I like about the Tech Park is that it brings this this center of gravity, this density to a confined space. So imagine when you have these wet labs and dry labs and nano biomedical researchers grabbing coffee with an entrepreneur working on an app, meeting with a venture capitalist, and it becomes just a way of life. It becomes culture. I think that's a trigger moment that has happened in other communities around the country that has really sparked some significant growth. And I think we're getting really close to seeing that. And we've got it here in very early stages, but I think in 10 years we'll look back and we'll say, hey, do you remember when we used to be in that temporary space that had all these free water features? We've come a long way since then. Jess, will you throw up the next slide?
Well, I think that before you get to that, I think that's an important part, and that's not a misconception of what the Tech Park is, but a lack of knowledge by the majority of the public of what the park is. And they see it as just office space, and guys are going to sit there and bang out some code and work around a microscope. But that's really not what the park is. It's trying to create this view. This is a microcosm of it. You're in this space every day. You kind of see the Jay likes to call them creative collisions of folks.
It's not creative, but it's actually the velocity of the creative collisions, right?
Right. But that's what the park is going to attempt to create on a much larger scale than this. And that's what's going on in some other areas around the country that are kind of in the same mode we are, is recognizing that the technology industry is not going anywhere, or it will go somewhere if you don't have the facilities to support it. If Little Rock doesn't have a facility like this and an environment like we're going to create, companies are going to pick up and move to Nashville, Dallas, Austin, and wherever else. So, big part of our future economy.
And I want to touch, because this will lead into this. As we were doing our research around the country on what was working and what was not working, it became very obvious to me that space alone was worthless. There's a lot of space that's dedicated to this type of activity across this state and across this country that hasn't worked. And again, that's part of the blessing, I believe, in being so painfully bad in the site location process. We've learned from what others were doing. I recall being with French Hill, prior to meeting Congressman French Hill, on a trip to Northwest Arkansas for a meeting where we were just going up and going back. And we had about 30, 45 extra minutes as we were leaving, and he said, "Is there something you want to see?" And I said, "Yeah, I want to see the iceberg, because what we're trying to do is kind of replicate what the iceberg is doing in Northwest Arkansas." He said, "Sure, I've heard about that. Let's go take a look at it." Well, we went in, and if anybody can make a sound of crickets, that's exactly what you saw. Nothing. And I looked around, and I went, "Well, this looks like a really neat space if there was somebody in here." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "What's this much ballyhooed entrepreneurial activity?" And the reality of that was, when there was programming, driving activity in that space, it was packed. But without programming, without driving those creative collisions and that opportunity to learn, people just didn't show up for the sake of showing up very long, because they had better places to go. And so we went to St. Louis, and one of the things that we heard from the Wexler folks that have partnered with universities and others across the country in doing this type of activity over and over and over at places like the Innovation Quarter in Wake Forest and BioGenerator in St. Louis was, you have to program it. If you don't program it, it's just more empty space for people to use. And without that programming, they will eventually move to where there is programming, because that helps them evolve into the company that they want to become. Our partners in this whole ecosystem, whether it be the Innovation Hub, whether it be Innovate Arkansas, whether it be the universities and their activity, we've all learned that together. You can't just have space. This isn't the Kevin Costner field of dreams. If you build it, they don't always come, and if they come, they don't always stay, which is why what we're doing today and what we've done in helping create the Venture Center and helping move along the process with Innovate Arkansas and the Innovation Hub, and with what's going on in Conway in the central Arkansas region, that's why it's so important. I'll never forget walking in with Lee. I didn't know Lee very well. We were in the National Entrepreneur Center, and they had all of these startup companies there to visit with us about their process. There was a guy across the room in a top hat and Victorian suit. He obviously stood out. And I said, "I want to talk to that guy." And so they took me over, they introduced me to him, and I said, "Why are you here?" And he said, "Well, I'm from a little bitty town," and he named it 60, 70 miles outside of Nashville, Tennessee. And I went, "Really? Why are you then in downtown Nashville, Tennessee?" He says, "I come here 2 or 3 times a week because this is how my business has gotten off its feet and begun to grow, because I have access to mentors, I have access to programs, I have access to people who understand how to access capital. I have access to all the things that in that little town I'll never have access to. That's why I'm here." And I turned and I looked at our folks before we left, and I said, if we don't do this, and if we don't do it right, this won't ever succeed, regardless of the great ideas that come from it. So that's why this whole pathway and having people within the ecosystem, and no one owns it, everybody's part of this, having people within the ecosystem helping push people along this line is so important.
Awesome, thank you. And Jay, you're absolutely right. When we started planning Venture Center, I think you were one of the first folks that we talked to. And for us, it wasn't about space really first. It was, how do we just do the work? How do we get investment into companies? How do they hire people? How do they grow? How do they quickly have an exit? So that founding team now can go and start 5 more companies. So we started in the chamber. We kind of took over the first floor of the chamber building. Who all came to one of our events when we were at the chamber? Okay, cool. So I'll tell you, Jay and his team are awesome, because we completely just took over like I'm welcome house guests that first floor.
Lots of activity this afternoon, he's talking about these people.
Who are those people downstairs? What are they doing? But it was great because, we were a startup, we were lean, we didn't have any money to pay for a space. So the space was great. What it enabled us to do was have a focal point to run 1 million cups when we launched the program, to have the pre-accelerator class, to do workshops and the Tuesday night programs, and we ran a hackathon in there. And I think that was a little concern to some of the business community. What are they doing running a hackathon in the chamber? But we had 50 people show up. It was the first hackathon in Fort Rock. That was just a few months ago.
I literally had leadership wanting to know if we could change the name.
The Codathon. So one of the things that we learned before we started the Venture Center, also looking at best practices around the country through this platform, Startup America, that we've talked about before, what kinds of programs work? How do they work? What are the processes? There's a lot of different flavors of this stuff around the country. So we took those best practices, we adapted it to Central Arkansas to meet local goals. And what we came up with was this 4-stage process. So the ideate stage, this is the first. You can look at it this way as far as creating value and growth, jobs, and exit. But if you also hold your hands out like a V, you see a funnel, right? So everybody do this for me real fast. Make a funnel, right? So the ideate, and so it's important. So ideate's the very top of the funnel. So one of the things we do here is we have all sorts of programs. And the coach fits into this, meetups, hackathons, startup weekends, 2 days to start up, all sorts of different activity that engages new people into the entrepreneurial journey. College students, corporate employees, just people out there from Central Arkansas, getting them engaged in the ecosystem. These are things that the Venture Center does, things we do with other people and other organizations. This ideate, this top of funnel activity is something that we all grow, because the more activity at the top of the funnel, the more successes that will come down through. One of the cool things that we've noticed when we have one of these larger events is we see a pretty good conversion rate. So let's say we've got 100 people at the start of the weekend hackathon. We see about 5 out of the 100 say, hey, this app, this thing I've been working on for the last day or two, I want to try to do that. I want to make that a company. Right? So we move those people into the cultivate stage. The cultivate stage is literally the stage where you take the idea on a napkin and you get it to your first seed investment. So our tagline is turning ideas into real ventures. This is the cultivate stage, idea on a napkin to first seed investment. Now, historically in Arkansas, especially in Central Arkansas, that pathway has taken 2 to 5 years. And so when you're in technology, 2 to 5 years is way too long. The market changes, the technology changes. You often can't get along with the team, in that amount of time. It's just, there's too much risk there. So the first thing we did is we launched this pre-accelerator course. We did that last fall. We've run the class twice. It'll start again in September. This pre-accelerator course has a curriculum, there's process, there's mentorship in it. It is designed to teach entrepreneurs different things like how to start a business, how to de-risk your business for investors. What's the path of getting capital? How do you leverage all of the different players in the ecosystem at the right time and place to get your business to the next stage? And so that's been a really great component to de-risk an idea. So idea to investment, a lot of entrepreneurs have been taking that idea and going to the investment community and saying, hey, I've got this great business, you should invest in it. And the venture capitalists go, hey, this is a really great idea, go do 100 things and come back. And so the entrepreneur in their mind says, you know what, there's no capital in Arkansas, I'm gonna go somewhere else. Well, the truth is there's plenty of capital in Arkansas. Frankly, we have more, sure. But there's quite a bit of capital in Arkansas. The problem is there's a lack of investable businesses. And so the cultivate stage, if you have an idea, and you want to raise money, you want to build a sustainable company, this is the stage to do that. Okay. One of the things we do in cultivate is we start this mentorship process. Our mentors have to be trained, right? So they go through a half-day training. If you're one of our mentors, raise your hand. You got 4 or 5 in here. Cool. So these are great guys and gals, and they've done this before, but they come in for training, right? How does this mentor process work? They fit into one of 4 categories. They have had to have built, raised money, and sold a company to mentor in that space. If they haven't done that before, they're not going to talk on the entrepreneurs about it. The second is funding process expert. How do you raise money? How do you de-risk for investment? How do you prepare? And what's that process of raising money look like? The third is industry expert, so they know about healthcare, retail, financial services, that specific industry. The fourth is functional, so IP law, accounting, marketing, operations, right? They have to be a domain expert in their fields eventually. One of the things that these entrepreneurs that raise money in solar company often, many times have done, is they score the startups as an A, B, C, or D. And without going into all the details today on how that works, it's all about, if you're a C, how do we get you to become a B? How do we use mentorship? How do we use classes to pump you up? If you're a B, how do we get you to be in? The A's are the ones that have a scalable, repeatable business model, right? A true startup that can be fueled by capital and grow. Only the A's can apply to the accelerate stage. So the accelerator, the goal in the accelerate stage is to get to a minimum of 1 million annual recurring revenue, right? And eventually we'll launch to the scale stage. And the goal here is to get to 10 million annual recurring revenue. So as you look at how capital is injected along the timeline, in the scale stage, you have some sort of exit, private equity investment, an acquisition, or IPO. And when that happens, that founding team, at some point, they're jumping ship, right? Because that particular business is over. And they come back into this ideate, cultivating stage, and they start again. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to build a process that can be repeated with content, with curriculum, with programs, that can fuel activities and create real businesses in the market. Yeah, that was a lot. Y'all have anything else before we open up for questions?
I just want to touch on a piece of this that probably doesn't become as upfront as I want it to be, and it is. So as we've been going through this whole process, if you look at the Central Arkansas economy, the Little Rock economy in this state, when the national economy went into the tank, we were lauded as the fourth best economy in the country 2 years straight. And the reason why we were is if you look at the makeup of our economy, we have a very mature economy that consists of healthcare, government, education as the three primary benchmarks of employment in this region. And that's good because those are all three stable, typically growing industries, not fast growing, but typically growing industries. So when things are not good, they're still there and they're still slowly growing, as we were during that time frame. But what we don't have is that rubber band effect that a lot of other economies have because of the entrepreneurial nature and the small business startup activity that they've had there that up until recently we've not had here. And so we looked at this as a way to create a bigger pie of growth across the entire region. That's the reason why we're just as happy to work an HP project that lands in Conway or a Birch project that lands in Searcy as we are a Wellspun or a Caterpillar project that lands in Little Rock and North Little Rock. We do economic development activity across a 60-mile radius. But one of the things that this also provides is an opportunity to create additional talent for the existing industry that's here. Industry that, while we know the axioms and the HPs, you don't often look at some of that next group of companies that will be starved for growth unless we have the talent here, unless we're creating and attracting and retaining the talent here to allow them to grow. That's another big part of what this is. It's an existing industry expansion program, just as much as it's a new business entrepreneurial program. Because in the end, the more you feed both sides of that fence, the longer and the stronger the fence becomes.
One of the things that's true about a startup or an entrepreneur is they're looking for two things, right? Customers and probably capital, right? Customers and capital. What is a corporation looking for? Talent. Startups usually represent pretty good talent. A lot of times corporations can represent a customer to a startup. And it all ties back into economic development. So when you bring these three groups together, they all have similar goals. They're not really competitive, they support each other. It really becomes a method for sustainability, right? For really having true impact, moving the needle. One of the goals with the Venture Center is that we continue to staff up. We launched a dozen more programs that are on our roadmap. It's really cool stuff. But to create an organization that's plugged into all of the different groups and an organization that is sustainable by itself, an organization that is selling things like a startup, right? Is bringing the corporate community, the business community in with the startup community, and really helping to elevate all of those. Cool. So one of the last things I wanted to say is that I think this is a really great example of public-private partnerships. The tech park being this public entity that has this space, wants to support this, but needs entrepreneurs to be in this space. And the Venture Center being a private entity focused on building companies that eventually can move into the tech park, which is great for them because it's discounted or it has these other features and it has this density. So this, to me, that I'm aware of in the area is a great example of a public-private partnership. Jay, you worked on a lot of these. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, I believe, obviously, we're in a lawsuit at the moment over public-private partnerships for economic development, and I think that will eventually work itself out at the Supreme Court level. But if you look at successful models across the country, almost always it's either a public-private with mostly private, or it's a public-private that's almost a 50-50 type scenario. You have to have both. And so if we're trying to sell this program, if we're trying to sell the ecosystem and what's going to come out of it to the corporate business community, they have to see what's in it for them. Just as in 2011, we went to the citizens of Little Rock and sold the vision of the jobs of the future and why we needed to invest in this thing called the technology park to be able to drive those jobs in those companies. We have to do the same thing with the private sector. And that was one of the big reasons of bringing Brent on. Brent, while Brent was at Arkansas Business, he literally was an entrepreneur starting up Flex 360 within that organization, growing it into a very valuable division of what Arkansas Business is. And yet he was a perfect example of the type of person that we needed running the day-to-day operations of the tech park, because he gets the fact that you can't do it with just public money. And unfortunately, most of the time, you can't do it with just private money. It needs to be a transparent partnership of the two to be sustainable and to be worthy both to the public and the private sector.
So to give you some hard numbers, the membership for the Venture Center is $150 a year. And with that, you get 3 mentor sessions for free. And then if you want an additional 3 mentor sessions, you buy a bucket of 3 for another $100. So there's some revenue that helps us pay for some expenses, but it is heavily discounted to the entrepreneur community. If the Venture Center had to pay the full burden of this space, it would be $120,000, $150,000 a year. Ergo, it would never happen, right? Or all of the entrepreneurs, I think I calculated at one point, would have to pay like $10,000, a year in membership fees or something like that. So let's all give these guys a round of applause for helping us build this partnership. Able to have air conditioning, internet, and space to use. So thank you guys very much for helping with that. Okay, so let's open it up for a couple of quick questions, and then Jessica has some really great announcements. Joe.
The technology park, once it gets up and going, I understand it's primarily, it's going to have some probably high dollar wet lab space, and which is sorely needed. is there, and of course you're going to have the IT college and so forth contributing perhaps some fledgling businesses, or maybe, I don't know if maybe at accelerated stage or what. Will there be any set-asides for a space, for instance, for kind of fledgling, not necessarily just idea people, but maybe at the accelerated stage that aren't affiliated with the major institutions?
I'll answer that from my perspective, and I'll hand the microphone to Brent. So when we were looking at building the model, and then the model being in this case 500,000 square feet of space when it's all said and done, what would that look like? Well, you begin with the part of that 500,000 square feet that helps pay for most of it, if not all of it. And then you break down into different less than market rate space to the point where you get to the almost free space. Because you have to have, speaking of this funnel, you have to have that entry-level opportunity to come into the system and work your way through to the point where you're either getting into the full market rate space or you're leasing space surrounding the technology park in the downtown area or the region for that matter for what it is that you need. So the answer to the question is yes. Exactly how much of that space will be free to almost free, in the end, I can't give you the exact percentage, but that has to be part of the process of what the whole space looks like for it to work.
Yeah, I think on what Jay said, it's definitely part of the plan. There'll be co-working space similar to what we have now. So there'll be that environment. There will be below market rate space for newer companies. But there'll be terms and conditions associated with that, which will graduate out of that. Once you get whatever the parameters are, you have to pick up and move out of that space. Because your company becomes more than a minute here in the park. You clear out, another one comes in, hopefully you move into a bigger space in the park. So there'll be room for all of that, and then there'll be separate facilities for the wet and dry lab space. Those will be future phases. But the first phase that we'll do, we'll have all the space I just mentioned outside of the lab space.
That process of moving through, whether it's a programmatic process or it's the, here's how you're at, you move to the next, whatever. This is really important. So there were all these incubators that got started in the 90s, and they provided some amount of this kind of space. They had some lawyers and accountants and folks come in, and they recruited some entrepreneurs. And that was it. And so inside this box, you had 3 pretty good components, but you missed the fourth one. The fourth one was, what's the engine inside the box that's going to pump these people out the other side? And so we really are all focused on manufacturing and producing them and kicking them out. So in a couple weeks, we're actually going to make an announcement that one of our first shared members is being booted out of the space because it's actually got a great business, raised capital,
Graduation.
hired 10 people, and is getting his own space.
We're going to celebrate.
That's right. Anybody else have a question?
And I want to make one point to that because I talked about Durham a few minutes ago. I was in Raleigh, Durham, a month and a half or so ago, and literally had the opportunity in downtown Durham. They've taken 1 million square feet of tobacco warehouse space and literally created an entrepreneurial ecosystem. A live, work, play, and learn area that is enviable even to the research, back to research time, the folks are trying to figure out how to emulate it. Whereas Durham has always been that stepchild, now Durham seems to be the golden child. While I was there, they were having a party celebrating one of those companies that had come through the whole process and had bought 2 floors of an old empty building across the street from where they were, that they were renovating into their new space that they were moving into, and they were having a party to celebrate. So I'm big on parties. I want to party a lot.
All right, last question. Mark?
Yeah, I'm just interested to learn a little bit more about the lessons you learned and to use the term program to make sure that, if you build it, you do know. Could you define program? I think the biggest challenge, or add something into that, the biggest challenge, you mentioned UMS 2 or 3 times, the biggest challenge of Brian and Nancy Gray has right now is sitting in determining whether they can take something through the irrigation. One of the largest hurdles is wetlands. So
the consternation of the site issue. Folks don't typically get that if you have somebody manufacturing an isotope over here that has to be injected over there within 7.5 minutes, or it's worthless, then 7.5 minutes of drive time won't work. You have to literally be there within 3 or 4 minutes, and that's the reason why the siting piece was so hard for a lot of people to understand on the bio side. Obviously, technology can go almost anywhere. We've been out of wet lab space now for well over 2 years. We've been turning away companies that want space in bioventures for over 2 years. We've turned away companies to New Jersey and to other places because of not having that access. There is some wet lab space down in the old depot in the Pine Bluff area, but again, you get that far away, and now all of a sudden it's really not worthwhile for what UAMS, Children's, and even NCTR are doing. And so, in looking at the building of this space, part of that would include a specific building that would be wet lab centric, in that it's so expensive to build that stuff. You don't want to build a floor here and a floor there and a floor over here. What we're looking at doing is building an entire building, and a lot of it will likely be shelved early on because we need to spec it to be much larger than what we need on the front end to give that wet lab space availability to those companies not only coming out of bioventures, but those companies that are coming to the Central Arkansas area to take advantage of the research that's being done by the myeloma folks or being done by anyone else. So the first phase of what you heard last night with the tech park and the annex building of the Stevens property that we're purchasing, that will most likely all be tech-related space. The first new building literally has to be this bio building so that we'll have access, not only for those folks coming out of bioventures, but also for those folks wanting to come here and be able to access the researchers that currently have some really neat things going on. It's the same reason, and people don't realize this, but if you look at the Nanotechnology Center at UALR, when UALR did an amazing feat of keeping Dr. Alex Birch here, when everybody, not only across the country, but across the world, wanted him to come to where they are, simply because of the amazing progress that he's making in his research, they had to buy some really specific equipment that's expensive, but it can only be placed in certain areas because of vibration issues. You can't pick that up and move it down here. Just like you can't pick up those researchers, a lot of them at UAMS, and bring them down here. But what you can do is do everything you can to connect here to there, so that folks here have access to that equipment, whether it be at UAMS or UALR, and there's that creative collision happening in all different places, both from the technology standpoint as well as the bio and the instead. Oh, the final program. I look at programming as specific events and activities and advice that drives a potential entrepreneur or an entrepreneur in the process itself through the process systematically. I don't think that, when I first started talking about this with some of my friends at Stevens, they thought that all of you would come in with long hair, having not had a shower in 4 or 5 days, wearing flip-flops, possibly high, and just finding a place to hang out because you got kicked out of your mother's basement. That's, unfortunately, sometimes what the entrepreneurial ecosystem vision is in some people's eyes. And so what I tried to help them understand was, if you go to where this is really happening and where it's a system, it's not, yes, there are creative collisions and yes, there are happenstances, but it's a system and a systematic approach of going from ideation all the way out to the point where you're stable. And if you continually put people through that systematic approach, you're going to have success. Every now and then you're going to hit on one of those that just happens. And God bless us, I hope we have a bunch of those. But if you don't have that system in place and the ability to plug folks in at the right level, both from the mentorship and the access to capital and the access to market and all of those things that companies have to have, as well as new ideas feeding into that process, then it's just not sustainable. This is sustainable. Having just a nice piece of space, whether it has water features or not, with air conditioning and access to internet, that's not a system. What we're trying to do is build that system. So I should quit saying programming and start talking more about the system.
A system of programs. And so an example. So the example of a program today is the accelerator class. The ability to spend 3 months going through a class, learning the process of entrepreneurship, how to do customer development, how to do the methodology, tools like the campus, all this other stuff, to get to raising capital through customer validation training. So there's all this stuff to it, and you can't go through all this stuff in an hour's workshop. But if you spend 3 to 7 hours a week and you go through 3 months, it will make a meaningful impact on your business. Cool. Let's give them a round of applause for coming in today. And Jessica is going to share some really cool programs that are coming out.
Right, yeah, so speaking of programs, a system of programs, if you will, I want to talk to you guys about some things that we have happening. I've turned it off. Okay. Steve, can you do it? It's really not smart enough. Okay, so this Saturday, you guys, we have pitching night. It is a high energy, high fun, great experience in the party room basement of our friends down the street at the Flying Saucer. If you come and pitch, you can win $1,000. Now, I think that's worth 60 seconds of your time to come, stand at the mic and tell us what your big idea might be. All right? So if you haven't signed up yet, today's probably our last chance to get people signed up to pitch. I only have about 3 spots left for people pitching. So if you want to get signed up, you can go to venturecenter.co/pitch-and-fight, or you can walk over here to the iPad by the wall and sign up. If you have any issues, I'll be happy to get you helped out with that. And when you're pitching, I'm sure you want to bring along your own cheering section, because the way that you win is by amassing the highest number of votes. And I'm not saying that you should cheat by any stretch, but if you bring 25 people with you and they all vote for you, and then your odds are pretty good that you're going to definitely be in the top 10.
And just so they have
yes.
3 people, they can't write a script.
No.
To do the voting for you. So
No. Yeah, that's definitely cheating. If we're getting into the dev side of things, we're done here. So, okay, so there's that one. How does it work, Steve? Okay, and then Member Mixer. That's the next thing coming up. Member Mixer is every second Tuesday. We get started around 6, and there's a fantastic high-speed mixer for a lot of creative collisions. What? Awesome, would you come again? Okay, I'm gonna see you this time. Okay, so this one is going to just be the speed mixer portion along with some very quick pitches, and then we're gonna bring back the expert open mic chat in September. Mentor training. Lee talked a little bit about mentorship before. We've got some great mentors in the room. Can the mentors raise your hands again? If any of you guys are interested in mentorship, I would encourage you to talk to one of these mentors, and by all means sign up for mentor training. If you have any additional questions, you can ask Lee, you can ask me, you can ask any of the Mentor Center staff. The training this next time is August 18th. It's in the morning from 8 to noon, and it is going to happen quarterly. So the next one, I believe, is in October. And then we are having our very own startup event. It's like Startup Weekend, but on steroids, if you will. And it's going to be August 21st through August 23rd. We're going to have a really unique opportunity here where most startup events, people come in and pitch their ideas. People can still come in and pitch their ideas and bring teams. But what we're gonna have is an opportunity to be able to build companies around specific pieces of research that are brought in from the universities, as well as solve some problems for some local corporations and potentially become a customer of theirs. So I think it's a fantastic amped up way to do a startup event. We hope that we'll see all of you guys for that. Of course, you can go to our website to register, and that's going to be venturecenter.co/2days to startup. I felt like there was another one, but I guess there's not.
Nope.
So that's it. We're also going to have our security hackathon on October 17th, so please join us for that. It's going to be the day after Tech Fest, and I feel like I've thrown a lot of things at you, but it's Co-work Wednesday. That's what I almost forgot. So every Wednesday, immediately following Million Cups, you are welcome to spend the day working in here. You can sit at any of our round tables, or you can sit at these desks right here. Can you wave your hand back there? You can see this is where you can work, where our developer friends are currently hanging out. So that's every Wednesday, immediately following Million Cups. If you want to be able to come down here and work pretty much any time, one, you can talk to Brent about renting a space. And two, you can talk to us about becoming a member, because our members can come in, hold meetings and work. They just don't have a dedicated space. You go to the tech park. I think that's all I've got. So thank you guys for coming out today. We hope to see you next week, but I really hope to see you on Saturday for kitchen times.